over Mahaka village with the original one of this set, in which the moon was very much bigger. So this is the natural size moon from a fairly similar viewpoint compared with the larger moon. And that's not a criticism of the larger moon image, it's just a comment from me for information. But this is a lovely image, crisp and clear. You've got lots of detail, and the building's lit up very nicely. The shadows have got detail in, and you've got a perfectly exposed moon, which is fairly easy to do at a total eclipse, where you've got a similar light intensity between the moon and the foreground. But very, very, very good image, well captured, like it a lot. Well done. This one is from a slightly either further back viewpoint or with a wider angle lens from the same location. And it's capturing a gorgeous sky. That sky is what makes the image. We've got the road again leading up to the Pueblo. We've got the Christmas lights, which add an extra element to the image. The only two things for me, firstly, this petrol sign here, right on the very edge of the frame. I would have been tempted to have taken a slice off the left just to cut Sepsa out of it, and also a slice off the bottom. This bit down here doesn't really add anything to the overall image. So you can keep the same ratios, just pull a slice off the left and a slice off the bottom. The second element is it's not quite as sharp as the previous image of Mahaka. The last image of Mahaka was pin sharp. Here we've got a bit of noise artifacts coming in, and there's a little bit less punchy, but it's still a very good image and a lovely capture with that sunset light. And this, of course, was Emilio, if you hadn't guessed. And I like the picture of the moon.
Thank you, Trevor. Just the only thing is the Milky Way is my first time I went to take photos of the sky night with you. And thank you for your tips and your comments. Thank you.
Yes, and that shows the reward of being out at 4 o'clock in the morning taking pictures.
Yes, totally.
Right. Now this one's an interesting picture. We've got a contrast of three architectural styles here. The big, bold, modern, glass-fronted, panelled window. Over on the right, we've got the old, almost stone and plaster type effect. And here we've got railings and brickwork and modern junk, if you like, air conditioning units. So there's a contrast through the three elements of the image. And if you look in this upper part, there's so much going on. There's a studio light. We've got a backlit image here, obviously, I assume pinned into the window. We've actually got something inside being lit itself behind the windows. We've got another image here lit. We've got shutters down, we've got plant. There's an awful lot going on up there, and I can see why the photographer has been drawn to this very interesting thing with this real bright splash of colour. And it is about contrast. But for me, this bit on the left with the aircon units and the steel rails doesn't do a lot. And I feel that the bottom half of the image, which is just blank with rails and lights, that doesn't do a lot for me. This upper half is what does. This I think is great, and I think this is where the photograph is. You've corrected the verticals superbly and horizontals, and you've obviously pointed the camera upwards and managed that extremely well. And it is interesting, and there is contrast, but I do feel there is perhaps more of the photograph in the upper part of the image than there is in the whole. Now this one is made by colour. I like the recession of the lights going ever smaller up the hillside. It's a great location. And colour. This guy in his orange shirt with his yellow racket and a blue tennis court. Those three colours really make the image. However, for me, there's elements that spoil the image. The dominant of which is this lamppost straight here, cutting through what is the dominant part of the subject. And I don't know if you could have got a viewpoint 2 meters to the right in which you would be clear of this lamppost. But if you could, I think you would have had a far superior photograph. Also, I would have taken a whole set of images and then had a look at them and picked which one was the best. Because for me, the timing on this isn't right. You've got this guy here who is partly behind one of the stanchions. You've got a guy here in blue, his partner, where you can only, I'll just zoom in a little bit. This guy in blue, you can only just see a little bit of him. He's behind this big pole. This guy, he's half hidden behind this thick corner post. And the guy returning the ball happens to be hidden behind these posts that just happen to overlap. So there isn't a single player that is totally in space. So if he was slightly to the left and in this space, I think that would have worked. If we'd have got this player out here, or the guy with the serve, if he was there or in here, it would have been better. But as it is, each of the 3 of the 4 key players are hidden behind various metal supports. So take lots of images, and if it's on a tripod, you can then even select one image with this guy in red, one with the guy in blue, one with the guy in white, and just put them as you wish in the frame. So for me, that one was a good idea, a great study in colour, but hasn't quite worked with its execution. Now this one is a study of graffiti. And you've got a roller shutter with painted graffiti, you've got a window with painted graffiti. You can't spray on this, on the wreckers, so they'll spray on the walls instead. And it's 3 different types of graffiti going down this walk. And you've timed it so that there are people reflecting in this window. I think that was deliberate. From personal viewpoint, I don't know whether it's better with or without them. The author, I think, wanted them in there, and credit to the author for timing it to do that. But there's 2 things I would have changed if for me. for me, this bit on the left isn't adding very much. Now, I don't know what is beyond this on the right, and it may just be that what is beyond this on the right is significantly distracting, and therefore the frame has been cropped there. But I would, if it's possible, like to have seen a little bit more along here on the right. But the other change to position I would have made, you've taken the photograph from eye level. I would have got down on my knees and taken it from waist height. So at the moment, what you have got is this big triangle of, sorry about that, of boring pavement. If you'd have got down on your knees, you would have been level with about here. And this would have led into the right-hand side of the frame at the same, sorry about doing that, at the same angle as the top, rather than looking down at the pavement. And I think that would have been a much more powerful composition, losing a little bit on the left-hand side. Secondly, this is about graffiti. And for me, this poster, which is the most brightly coloured element of the entire scene, detracts from the graffiti. So I would have been tempted either to have done a content-aware clone, get rid of it, or if you wish to keep it to be factually precise, I would have heavily desaturated it, so it had much more muted tones like the poster below. So those are the changes that I would have done, but I do like this. It's well seen, this different types of graffiti going down the street, and a good effort. Now this is a study of architecture. When I first saw this, I thought, oh, shame about the people. But the more I looked at this, I think the people add an element to it. And I think the people add a very important element to it. I'll come back to the people in a moment. But what we're dealing with is really brutalist concrete and glass modern architecture, and this lovely old stone floodlit architecture up here. And you've chosen an angle where we've got this strong diagonal making a nice triangle up here, where you've put that in that triangle, and the 2/3 triangle has got the main subject in. So in terms of composition, it's extremely strong. I think you've got the amount of light on this just about right. You can read the text on the end, but it doesn't dominate. The dominant part is more here and up to this. So I think overall you have got a tremendous balance in this image. Now to the people. If you hadn't got this couple walking into the frame and you just had these two sat on the steps with their mask on, I would have been saying, you really want them to go. Just wait and let them leave, because they're looking out of the frame. So they've got boring expressions. They're looking out of the frame. They would have been a severe distraction. Now, by including this couple walking in with their eyes on the same level as theirs, they're not looking out of the frame. They're looking straight into their eyes, and you're bouncing back in. So this couple is actually stopping them looking out, and they are walking into this whole scene. So without this couple, I think this would have been a failure of an image, but by including them, I think it has really worked. I don't know if that was intentional from the author in terms of timing, but you've definitely succeeded by doing so. Good image. And this is Frank's. Wow, this has got some colour. This is a study in primary colours, red, green and blue. There is minimal yellow or other distracting colours, and that is what makes this image. I don't know whether it's from a car park or out of a hotel room or what, but you're looking down from a great height, maybe a top floor restaurant or something. But the vantage point is perfect. We've got reasonable control over the verticals, and I just love the composition. And it is made by this smoke. I've entertained somebody there. That smoke is crucial to the overall composition. Somebody has the microphone on.
Yeah, good.
Could you please turn the microphone off?
It's Rod.
Thank you.
Rod is not there.
It's Rod, is it?
Yes, he is. But it's not
Rod,
there.
turn your microphone off.
A cough or coffee? A cough.
Rod!
Rod has gone.
We'll have to wait for him. He'll cut this out so he won't get nagged on the playback. Right. So if I carry on talking, he can't cut it out. The only thing really on this one, sadly, is the noise. Whether it's sensor noise or whether it's compression, I'm not entirely sure, but sadly,
Rod, please mute your microphone. Rod.
Huh?
Rod?
Yeah?
We've had a lot of noise from you for the last couple of minutes.
Can you mute your microphone?
I think if I mute it, then I cut the whole audio off from the recording. Yeah?
You are not muted.
Okay. In that case, don't mute it, but could you please keep the noise down?
Right. I didn't realize it carried that far. Yeah? I was just talking to my daughter in the kitchen. Yeah?
Yes, but no, it was we had to have a break.
Sorry about that.
Right. Don't worry, Rod.
Hang on a second. I'm just
This
going
one.
to I'm just going to mute myself and see if it does give me that signal.
Okay. I'll talk, but not talk about the image, just in case in case we lose it.
It hasn't given me. I have muted.
Now,
right. I can still hear Emilio. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, in which case we can carry on. Oh, this one I really like. We've got a street scene. You know exactly where it is because the sign tells you where it is. But for me, it's two things that make this image. Firstly, composition. Secondly, timing. Composition, it would be very easy to just look at that down that street and think how impressive the lights are and try and focus in straight down that street. But by going for horizontal format and including this tree on the left hand side and moving this across more to the right hand third, I think it sets a bigger feel for where you are. I mentioned timing. Just look at the size of that crowd. Yet the photographer has managed to press the shutter at a moment where every foot is in the frame. Nobody is half in, half out. Nobody's cropped off. And I think that is an excellent bit of timing. You can argue possibly that this sign here is a little too dominant. And for me, I do find it does fight with this, especially being green. And maybe just by reducing the saturation or brightness on that a little bit, you could have a better balance between the two. But the only real other minor tweak I would make is down here on the left. This little bit of blue that could just be cloned out. But once you see it right on the edge of the frame, it pulls the eye to the edge of the frame. But I very much like this shot. Very nice. Now this is a case of struggling to fit everything in. You've actually got the image into the top of the frame, just. And it is a challenge. You've got the verticals vertical, even though you're on an eye level really down with these shots. So it's taken quite a bit of pulling to get the verticals correct up there. It's a very nice bit of architecture, good bit of detail in the stonework, quite a crowd of people around, and a black sky. I think the crowd of people and the busyness down here doesn't actually add much to it. So I think in terms of timing, I think you could have gone either way. If you'd have gone a bit earlier, you would have had a little bit of colour in the sky and added a bit more colour to there and added an extra element of interest to the image. Or you could have gone out either early morning or later on at night when the sky is still pitch black, and you would have had less people around and perhaps a bit of a clearer view down here, less clutter. Also, this building on the right is a little bit overexposed. I don't know if that can be rescued by pulling back in Photoshop, but it is a bit bright compared to what is the main subject. I know that's where the floodlights were lighting and therefore it was brighter, but by careful dodging and burning in Photoshop, you can correct things like that to some extent to focus the main light on your key subject. Now it is pin sharp down here, but it isn't pin sharp up at the top. And that might be partly due to the fact that you have had to stretch this a bit to convert the converging verticals. Or it may be limits of a wide aperture on the lens. I actually didn't look at the data on this to see what f ratio it was. f3.5. So maybe stopping down to f16 would have been better. And in fact, stopping down to f16 or f22, you could have blurred a lot of these people down here as well. I might also be tempted to try and tweak the colour balance to slightly bluer, but if you get too much of the blue up here, this could look artificial. So I don't think you're too far off in colour balance. Now this is a very nice capture of typical German market, a waffle store, and a lot going on. It's been cropped to square or almost square format, and I think that's probably a good move because it focuses in on the subject. By seeing more to the left or more to the right, I don't think would have helped this scene. So you've simplified it with a very good crop. I love the way the light is glistening off these tiles. Now, that's a very nice element. But in terms of this image, the only thing that I find distracting is this modern location sign here. Whether it's a sign for a tram stop, bus stop, or whatever, it's too bright. And once you see that, it's the only modern thing in here. I'm not worried about the windows up there, that's lost up there, but that is dominant. And I would have really tried to darken that down. If you wanted to be ambitious in Photoshop, you can actually clone that out. And I think it would have improved the image immensely if you had done so. But this is another photo where you don't just take one image, take several images. And you then, having taken several images, you can pick the best one. I'm just going to zoom in to see what is going on. What you've got is probably some of the most unfortunate timing possible. You've got this woman here looking out of the frame, quite bored. You've got this guy with his arms folded looking out of the frame, equally bored. You've got the woman round the back, and you've got the bloke looking puzzled, putting something into the bag. So at least he's doing something. So there's some action there. Only by zooming in did I notice that it isn't a couple here that are buying something or looking at the stall. It's a woman just sticking her face out there and a hand out here who is interacting with this man. If you'd have waited a short time, she would have been leaning forward into the frame. He'd have been to hand money or collect the goods. He'd have been leaning forward to the woman to pass it over. And rather than looking down, he'd have been looking at her. There'd been eye contact as you hand it over. And I think you would have had a much more powerful image from the element of the people rather than the overall image. There's two photographs here. There is the smaller crop and there is the whole. So you can get 2 for 1. But take several images. You never know at the time of taking necessarily which one is going to work, because the human eye will only look at one element in this frame. It won't look at all of them at the same time, not sharply. But nice shot and nicely cropped. And that's Harry. Somebody else who gets to exotic places. Now this is a perfectly composed image. And if you wanted night colour, you can't go many places better than this. The colours really are striking. Good composition. Putting this, the horizon on the thirds and the building up. I might even been tempted slightly to have lowered the horizon just a touch more. I like the way you've got a nice curve to the shape of the buildings. So on the left with no buildings, on the right we've got virtually no buildings and a nice curve. So you've got a viewpoint and place this interesting structure in the middle. So compositionally, you found an excellent viewpoint and the right lens for it. For me, it's overexposed by a stop. I would reduce the exposure by a stop. You can recover a lot of that in Photoshop, darken it down. I think with a darker sky and some greater blacks and darks in these buildings, it would be even more punchy than it currently is. But for me, part of this image is the reflections. But unfortunately, the reflections show a lot of water disturbance. With a camera on a tripod, as it should be, you can have an exposure with at f16 of several seconds. or even if you have to go to F22. And that would have blurred these into nice vertical streaks, and you wouldn't have had this choppiness of the water. And I think that would have lifted the image more, because at the moment the water isn't adding to the image. It's almost a distraction because you start looking at the high contrast in here, whereas with soft blurs you would look at the buildings more. This was taken at 1/20th of a second, and really this should be a 2 to 3 second exposure. But very nice viewpoint, striking colours, great to be there. I would try reducing the exposure, certainly on the upper 2/3 of the image. This one has got the opposite composition. This one has got the detail in the top third and the reflection in the water as the bottom 2/3. And for me, it's exactly the same issue as the previous image, in that the shutter speed again is too short. I feel that if you used a shutter speed of 2 or 3 seconds, you would have got beautiful vertical lines of colour, all taking you up to the subject, which is the top of the image. At the moment, with this being 2/3 of the image, it's the subject, and it's got far too much river detail in there for me. But great colours. For me, it's not as powerful as the previous image. It's not as sharp as the previous image either. But good use of thinking about composition, because it's all too easy just to put the bridge in the centre of the frame. And I think positioning the bridge as you've done is great. It's just the shutter speed wasn't for me the correct one to have used. Well, now I really like this one. Some people might argue that just photographing a statue, it's what the artist that made the statue intended, but it's not that. This one is showing that statue in its environment. You have got a perfect bit of positioning of the statues on the lower right. So the statue climbs out of the lower right in a lovely curve to the starkness of these buildings. As the previous one, again, the first one, I think this would benefit from half a stop less exposure, a little bit darker, maybe up to a stop, but probably only half a stop. But I really like the composition. You've got the verticals vertical, you've got the foreground sharp, you've got the background sharp. Yeah, extremely well done. The only minor points of criticism, you've got some branch or dust or something coming in here on the upper left, which you can clone out. And this building, so on the upper right, and this building, which just cuts in on the upper left, crop that out. You'll be a lot stronger. That, once you see it, becomes a distraction on that left-hand side, where you can clone it out or crop it out. It doesn't actually matter, but I would get rid of that. Otherwise, great shot. For me, half a stop darker, even better. And that's Janet Hornsey. Excuse me, I've just got a mouthful of refreshment to take. The mouth dries up when you talk for so long. This is a beautiful reflection. I'm assuming this is the wet street, and by going out in the wet and getting the camera low down, you get some superb reflections. And I'm assuming here that the camera is only something like 10 centimetres off the ground. And it's a lovely composition. You've got the old buildings going up, you climb up to the church, you've got the tower, then you come back down through the statue. So your eye goes around this. There's a slight distortion in there, in that the tower is leaning ever so slightly right, and so similarly on the reflection. And I would have just been tempted to pull that across slightly to correct that. And I like the colours in this, but for me, this has been totally let down by image quality. It's not sharp anywhere. It's got vast amounts of compression noise in the sky up here. This has been hit with some brutal JPEG compression and low resolution. And sadly, it has, for me, destroyed what I think is otherwise a fabulous image. I feel personally sad when I see an image which the photographer has captured so well, seen so well and captured, not make it through to something as the final exhibit. Very sad, but I did like the composition of the colours and structure of that. Now, the author was in this square at a much better time than I was. It was all clad with a very tacky market when I went there. I couldn't take any photographs. And the author has, on this occasion, really chosen a viewpoint that is nothing short of excellent. You have got an apex of thirds here and an apex of thirds here. And that point in the upper left perfectly balances the point in the lower right. So it's all about triangles. And compositionally, this is absolutely spot on. Time of day, perfect. You've got a little bit of blue in the sky. You know it's night time. The dominant lighting is artificial, but it's not completely black. So that is great. However, as before, image quality, JPEG compression, it's just, sadly, it doesn't live up to the photograph. The composition is superb, the image quality is poor, I'm sad to say. Timing as well. There's a lot of people around. It's not easy to get rid of them. But this guy here, looking out of the frame, I would have tried cloning him out. You might try cloning out a couple of the other bigger people. But better still, if you've got the camera on a tripod, use an exposure of several seconds, and many of the people will blur out the image completely. You've got a viewpoint which is quite high, so you'll need probably more than a travel tripod to get to that height. So I'm guessing this was probably a handheld shot, in which case you do have to live with the people. But I would look to do something to clone out the worst offenders. But so many things right with this image. Unfortunately, final presentation image quality is the one thing that isn't there. This one is beautiful. I absolutely love the composition in this image. I love the lighting. The whole thing is lit by these street lights, and your eye goes down these steps to the base, to the street lights, and just explores this pool of light. And what for me is so good about it is all this blank shadow area. You've got detail to know what's there, to see this building, to see its setting at a level at which it is not distracting. And that is superbly seen and superbly taken, apart from the quality. Again, it's not as bad, anywhere near as bad as the previous two images, but at a higher resolution, this image would be much stronger, and it would be an absolute winner of a photograph. As it is, I really like it. It's full of mood, full of atmosphere, and a great scene, and great take. And you might have it at a higher resolution, in which case present it at a higher resolution. This is the same location taken from the bottom, and it's got a similar mood around the light. This time you can see through the arch. However, for me, the buildings aren't as interesting, and this pavement doesn't lead you in like the steps did in the previous image. So for me, whilst this is a nice image, and it's got detail in here, I think from this angle, I would have zoomed in and I would have gone in closer to make the lamps bigger, make the arch bigger, and lose elements that don't help you like they did help you in the previous image. And these are Jean McPherson's. Now, who says you have to go to exotic places to take photographs? Who says you have to see pretty things to photograph? You can take a set of photographs of litter bins, and it's superb for me. This is not about photographing the subject. This is about photographing the light. And it works for me extremely well. If you actually look at this, we have got distracting elements in the photograph, but they are so well controlled and insignificant that they're not an issue. We've got a big advertising board up here. Thankfully, they've turned the floodlights off it. We've got a car there, but it's so dark that it's not a distraction. And what you're doing is putting in minor elements really to fill a canvas for the light. The light is the lamp and the tops of these bins and the light falling on the pavement. It's a photograph I wish I'd have taken, and one I wish I'd have seen. I think it's great. I don't know what this square is in the light. Obviously it's in the light, it's not been added by the author. But in a way, from a way I find that a bit distracting. But equally, it has also stopped that light being too blinding and allowed the photographer to actually get more of what the light is actually hitting. But I just love this. It's a study in light, and well done, and black and white essential for it. You do not want to be looking at green bins, grey bins, coloured chevron signs, no red and blue, no parking signs. You don't really notice those. Excellent. This one, and again, it's choosing a subject that, well, would you think of photographing it? A corrugated iron roof with fluorescent lights. But this is all about shapes. And And by going to a nighttime photograph with the lighting, you've got the pattern of the lights, you've got a wet base, so you get some reflections, and you've lost detail, so it simplifies the image. And the nice thing about this is you've got this pedestrian crossing leading you in from the point at which you've taken the photograph to this large triangular structure. And triangles are important elements in composition. And I think you've handled this very well indeed. My only comment, and it's an aside to this, in that, and I think it's a general one for the committee setting themes. We set themes throughout the year, which is great. So we do have a long lead-in time for all of our images, so we can think of them well in advance and get prepared. But I suspect, despite that, there are some people that perhaps only look 1 or 2 months ahead, even though we've got much greater notice. As a result, we've perhaps got less entries for this, because this month's competition or challenge taking place in November, we haven't had many dark evenings for people to go out in. If the challenge had been held in, say, January or February, I think more people might have gone out and taken images specifically for the challenge. Just as looking at f-stops and data, it was interesting that the last photograph was taken in June. So you can imagine this year, you can imagine what time of night the photographer was out taking that photograph. And that is really commendable. This one takes the prize of the oldest picture in the challenge because it's, according to the EXIF data, this one is apparently 40 years old, more than 40. Either that or the EXIF data is wrong. But either way, the point I was trying to get to is if we were to encourage people to take photos for the challenges, perhaps the night challenge should have been a little bit later in the winter. Now this photo, it took me a little while. I've looked at this for an awful long time. And the more I've looked at it, the more I like it. It's again a photo about light. And what we have is a single street light and a pool of light around it. And compositionally, this breaks all the rules. You put the light right bang in the middle of the frame. And what have we got in there? We've got a motorbike and nothing else. But it works. It really works. Because the detail in the shadow, what happens is you study this light and you then explore this old street with the different textures in the walls. And then you come to realize that motorbike actually is a very important element in the photograph. I think without it, there is no real sign whatsoever of human life in here. But you know, with that part there, yes, there is human life. And for me, this is a study of light and a study of shadows. And I think it's a very good photograph. It's not one I would have seen or taken. And I commend the author for doing it. For me, it's a great shot. Often called blue hour, that period after the sun has gone down and after the sunset colours have gone, before it turns completely dark, and everywhere is bathed in a blue light. And here the author has seen the different silhouettes from the deciduous trees that have lost their leaves up against the sky. And we've got 3 if you like, three ages of tree. You've got the compact young tree, you've got the middle-aged tree with all its fine twigs, and you've got the more elderly tree where bits at the end are dying off and it's getting a bit thin and sparse. And it's sort of like progression of man, progression of trees. Unfortunately for me, I'd have liked to have seen more of these trees against the horizon, but it couldn't be done. If you look in the shadow here, you might not see it on the zoom level of detail. There is another tree just coming up into the bottom of the frame. And if the author had got a lower viewpoint, that would have hidden this single tree here. So it couldn't be done. So it's a nice effort. I can see what was in mind, but I think to really work as an image, you would have wanted more trees against the sky, more of the tree against the sky. And this is Bijo. Well done. Now this is a striking two-colour night image. Simply everything is red, orange or blue, and it's all about contrast. And you're lucky because you've come to this location on a perfectly still evening. So the water is calm for great reflections, and these leaves at the top are not blowing all around into a blur. So you were extremely lucky to get this. And I do like the contrast of colour. Unfortunately for me, the highlights are just too burnt out. Again, it's one of those situations where it's like that early photograph from Ankel. The human eye can see the difference in tones in these highlights and the deep shadows, but the camera isn't capable of it. So it's one of those occasions where you need two exposures, one for the highlights, one for the shadows, and then simply merge the two together with a luminosity mask or use merge to HDR in Photoshop. Also, there's a slight tilt. The water is flowing a bit up to the right, so the camera wasn't quite perfectly horizontal. I think that would have been nice. Also, I think if you'd have got lower down, a little bit closer, you could have had this reflection near to the bottom of the frame and had a bit more sky visible, so that the trees here on the right would have just been a bit more separated from the blue low-hanging branches. And by seeing a bit more there with a bit more sky and less of this in the bottom, I think you would have had a slightly better composition. Just because we look through a viewfinder at eye level, we can very easily get dragged into taking pictures from there. Each time you're out, think about what is the perfect height to take the picture from. Have a look at it from low down. It might not be better, but quite often you might find that it is. But nice colours. And this one is great. If you haven't worked out what's going on, it took me a little while to work out what's going on. There is a fire in each of these cradles, and this chap is putting logs into the fire from his log pile. And there is a woman in the middle on a treadmill. And it looks like she's running around on the treadmill, driving this whole set of fires, this whole loop round. It's brilliantly exposed. You've got it absolutely spot on. You've got a fairly short exposure, so you've kept it sharp, which I think is needed. So really well done. The only thing for me is just a little tight in the frame. I would have just liked a bit more space on the right, a little bit more space on the top, and just to see his feet at the very bottom of the image. So apart from slight overcropping of this image, I think it's superb. Very well done. Congratulations to the author for doing a bit of light painting. Here we've got some fungi, and they are lit from the back by what looks like an ambient light source, an ambient artificial light source. And the author, I assume, has deliberately placed a small LED light down here in the centre to light or give some backlighting and light the underside of these fungi. And so well done for going out and doing that. Two things. I think if you'd have moved your camera a centimetre or two to the right, or moved the light a centimetre or two to the right, you could have actually hidden the light source behind this stem. And it wouldn't have been as dominant in the image. And I think that would have helped. You'd know it was still there because there'd be light coming around it. But I think by seeing the actual light source just to the side of the stem of the fungus, I think it's a little distracting. Also, some of the highlights are a bit burnt out, and in particular, this up here in the top left, I would have been tempted to have darkened that down. So overall exposure of highlights, I think, could have just been a bit less. It's easier to pull shadows than it is to correct burnt out highlights. Depth of field is fairly good. You are starting to lose a bit of depth of field and loss of sharpness on the front of the nearest fungus, but overall it's pretty good. So yeah, very well done. One final point on this one is viewpoint. This down here isn't as interesting, and I would have been tempted to have tilted the camera upwards and had a bit more negative space up above, and even perhaps to the right and have a bit less of this tree. So if the camera had gone up in the top right direction as an angle, I think it would have been a more slightly better composition, but it's still a great image. Now this time it's a bracket fungus, and we've gone in underneath, and again I think we've used handheld lighting for this one. So well done, because you've got some ambient light coming in to the upper left, and you've got the ambient light coming underneath. And this one, for me, is better exposed. You haven't got quite such a burnout in the highlights. So it's nice. And the light that you've added is very well balanced with the light that was there as an ambient source of light. I like the composition, that you've got a triangle going up in terms of the wood that it's on. And by placing the subject at the top, you know you're looking underneath it. You know it's not at ground level, as a bracket fungus is, and it gives a good perspective on it. My only comment on this one, and it may be something that was deliberately done by the author, but for me, to my taste, it hasn't worked, is it's an extremely shallow depth of field. If you look here, it is pin sharp, beautifully sharp, but here it's extremely blurred, and this top edge of this fungus here is very blurred. Again, I had a quick look at the EXIF data to see what f-stop the author used, and it's f2.8. For me, I would have been looking to use f16 on this. Maybe the author wanted these to be blurred for some reason. At the end of the day, you don't take photos for other people, you take them for yourself. If other people like them, that's benefit to them. If you like them, that's all that matters. But for me, I'd have used a narrow f-stop. And that's Marlene. And it's a nice image. I very, very much like this this fungus. I like the composition on it. Again, it's a very narrow line of focus just across that diagonal, which you may have deliberately gone for. But I love the composition on this one. Pedro isn't here, but if he does listen to the recording, again, it's put your title slide as the 5th one in your sequence, not the first one, so that the person who's doing the critique doesn't know who it is. Generally, we do know because we can tell from other reasons, but it does keep a bit of mystery for some people. But these are Pedro's. Now, this shot, I think, is an excellent composition on the commercial centre at Mahaka. By going at night and choosing this angle, where you're between the palm trees, you've got a setting for it. By going to monochrome, you have got rid of the distracting colours of these cars, I think it's a yellow advertising sign there, the red no entry sign, the Costa Marie advert, etc. All of that has disappeared, and you're just looking at the concrete shapes. So it becomes a study in architecture. This spotlight up here, which is an absolute disaster for astrophotography, somebody should take the bulb out. But it adds a key element to the scene in terms of this beam of light pollution coming up. So the photographer's chosen an excellent viewpoint, excellent to shoot it in black and white. Unfortunately, the image quality again lets it down. We've got no real detail. The palm trees look like they're posterized. The sky over here on the right is a series of blocks of tone. So in terms of the overall image, it looks like a posterization of probably no more than about 10 or 15 shades of grey. And if you're doing a posterization, I think you actually need, deliberately, you need less tones than that. This is too much when you get this sort of tonality into the sky. And if you're looking to do a black and white photograph, you need a full range of tones. So again, this is another one that for me, the author may disagree, but for me, it is one that is spoilt by too much JPEG compression. Intentional camera movement. And this one, I think, is a very good attempt at intentional camera movement. We've got a combination of fixed and blurred. So it's not entirely a blurred image. So you've got a single exposure, so you can read Whiskey Sue on the sign, but you've also got the blurred lines. You can see the tower and the palm trees, but you've got the blur. So it's very well done as the technique. The figure here, I don't mind that. He's an element in the overall scene. The one thing that I don't like, sadly, is this. The plastic dispenser on the right-hand side. Being blue when so much of the tones in here are yellow tones, it contrasts with them. So it stands out doubly strong. And it's sharp and it's large and it's on the edge of the frame. I would have been tempted to walk 1 meter further forward, and so you could have cut that out of the frame. I know you would have lost this, which I think is an important element of the image, but I think losing that along with this is better than keeping them together. But it's a very good effort at intentional camera movement. Well, this is good use of black and white as a study of the Fuente. You've got, because you've held the camera horizontal, you've got the verticals perfectly controlled in this. Using black and white has got rid of the distraction of the adverts on the notice board. It's got rid of whatever colour the bin is, the road sign, all that has disappeared. And you are just looking at the Fuente. You're looking at the detail of the building and the light that is coming. And the way that light is reflecting off the water in the Fuente and reflecting off the tiles down here. So it's a very good picture of this location. I think the base of this doesn't really add a lot to the image, and I would be tempted to cut off a slice roughly around here. So you keep these reflections to around about this sort of a point. But where the reflections fade out, I think losing the bottom around there would strengthen it. It would also lower the Fuente a little bit in the frame, which I think would help compositionally. But a very, very good effort. Slightly over sharpened. If you look, we've got strong white lines around the edge of our darker areas. So a little bit less sharpening. It's certainly a sharp enough image not to need that level of sharpening. It will stand on its own merits. But nice one, well done. And another intentional camera movement. And this one I had to look at quite some time. The thing I like about this one is this central bit. It's this red shape, this red blurred shape. Well, I don't actually know what it is, whether it's a canopy or something. Well, it doesn't matter, because it's about shapes and colours. And this is dominant. It's nicely positioned, and we've got some beautiful soft pastel tones, some green tones, some purple tones, some light warm tones around it. And I think it's a very nice intentional camera movement shot. There is a however, and the however is where you've taken it from. I suspect, I might be wrong, that you've taken it leaning out of a window. Because here, in the upper right, you've got what looks like a wooden shutter with a knob on it. And once you see this great big brown wooden shutter across a fifth of the image, you can't unsee it. And if you'd have avoided that wooden shutter, if you could have closed it, or alternatively moved a meter to the left so it wasn't in the frame, I think you would have had potentially a much stronger image. Maybe there was something so bright and distracting behind there that you opened the shutter to hide it, I don't know. But for me, that shutter is the thing that sadly spoils what would otherwise be a great image. But very nice try. We come to the final set of images, and these are mine. I don't know if anybody wants to pass comment on them. I'll take that as a no, and therefore say what I saw. I went out into nearby town looking for subjects for night photography, and came across these trees that are draped in lights, and I just took a few photographs of them. I really like them. I stopped down to a very small aperture to make the lights into a starburst. You don't need a filter to do that. You just need a small aperture. But I thought something was missing. And what was missing was a person. So I just stopped the first nearest person I could find on the street and asked them would they mind modelling for me underneath the lights. And she was quite happy to do so. So she was just somebody that I got her to stand there and look at the lights. So thanks to her. Now this next shot is one that you've seen. This I included in my astrophotography presentation a couple of weeks ago. It's the centre of the galaxy in all its detail. A hard thing is getting colour balance right, and I don't necessarily claim to have got it spot on this, but I feel I've got it fairly close. That is a challenge, because using auto and trying to saturate colours, you can find yourself in a quite an uncomfortable position when it comes to the final image. And people in Spain are lucky in that they get an excellent view on this. Britain, it's not great, and people in Scandinavia, it's even worse. You take those pictures when you're in Spain. I was lucky a month or 2 months, just nearly 2 months ago, to have a trip to Iceland. I went on my own, so it was entirely a photographic trip. My wife didn't want to go, so I thought, right, this is going to be a week of photography. So it was a case of setting the alarm early, staying up late, and going to locations that were probably a little too challenging for her to get to. This is Jökulsárlón, the lagoon there, which has icebergs. Knowing which way round north was always helps. So I positioned myself on the south side, so I had a view to north. And fascinatingly, the side where most of the public go is where you see the lights over here on the right-hand side. And you could tell there were lots of photographers out there on that side. I was the only one on this bank taking this shot across the icebergs. I took several pictures. The aurora comes and goes. What I like about this one is it's still in the dusk sky, and you've still got some sky colour here. I've got ones where the aurora is stronger, but I think as a photograph, I prefer the ones where there's a little bit of colour in the sky still. I chose a position along the bank where the icebergs gave me a lead in to the image from the lower left corner. You're on a steep bank, so it's not easy to get a position, but I found one. And these icebergs are lit by torch. So the technique that I did is I set the self timer to its 10 seconds, then ran like hell along the bank to the right hand side, and then lit it from probably about 45 degrees off to the right. That way you've got modelling, you've got shadows in the icebergs. You can see you've got texture in the top. If I'd have just lit it from where I stood, that texture would disappear. It would be like on-camera flash. The only thing negative for self-criticism I would make of this image is it's probably time to buy a better camera, because even though I've done noise suppression and I've used topaz on this, as you can see zooming in, we've got noise in some of the areas that even topaz hasn't been able to remove. So I think whilst I'm pleased with the composition, I'm pleased with the technique, I think a more expensive camera, or a more modern camera, is probably the thing I need to do.
Trevor, can I just say
Yep.
something? Because as
Yep.
you were saying, it's all personal. I would have preferred that photo without the lights on the shore, far shore. I find that especially the bright light on the far shore is sort of a bit distracting and takes your eye away. Yeah, I think that looks much nicer like that. But that's my opinion anyway, sorry.
I'm inclined to agree with you.
Ah.
Thank you very much indeed for that, David. Yeah, no, I think you've got a point there.
Okay. I don't like
Thank
criticism.
you.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, we all see things differently, and we all fail to see things equally. There's no perfect photographer, and yes, you've pointed something out, and I totally agree with you. Yes, thanks for that.
And I think your critiques are very good, very informative, and it does make you look twice, which I sometimes look 3 times and don't see the mistake. So it's nice to hear you now.
Yes, and you know, it's also nice to be on the receiving end of positive and helpful criticism like that. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, you saw this location. This one was when I had the Comet on this 2 weeks ago at the astrophotography. But I went back there this summer, and you can see from the EXIF data, 4:30 in the morning, and this is an hour's drive away from where I live. So, and taking time to set up, I actually left the house at 2:30 in the morning to go for this, and did light painting. And I wanted the Milky Way towards the galactic centre behind this old ruined mine. Unfortunately, the light pollution in the Peak District National Park in Britain is such that you don't get a great view of the Milky Way. So sadly, even though I positioned myself to get the Milky Way filling the space on the left-hand side of the image, it's not as pronounced as you would get that in a really good dark sky location. But this is done entirely with light painting, and there are actually something like 6 images into the sky merged in Sequator, and then 8 images in the foreground, all merged in Photoshop, lighting different elements with a torch from different angles. So I would be up on the bank, up on the right, slightly behind the chimney, lighting the chimney. I'd be going right to the back in the distance, lighting the wall so it's backlit, getting in front, lighting the front wall, going inside it, lighting the inside, lighting the separate bits of foreground. And there are 8 separate foreground images, all merged together using a stack in Photoshop and the blend mode of lighten. And that's the end result. And that's my final image. And that is it.
That's very well, Trevor. Thank you very much for all.
Yeah, well done, Trevor.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Very good. You are a photo painter, Trevor. The last picture was amazing, I think. It's like painting with photography and light, as you said, and it's amazing. So, I mean, we didn't dare to send in any photos this time because we normally don't do night photography, but because I thought it was a lot about the sky, and but I now see that we could maybe have sent in some photos, but next time maybe. Thank you very much. I learned a lot from your comments, because your comments are indeed so very well done, and even if we didn't have any photos, we learn a lot from it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I do hope I don't offend anybody in what I say. I try not to, but I do hope I don't.
No, not at all, not at all, Trevor. That's very erudite and very very knowledgeable. I sometimes sort of think, well, man, this guy really knows photography. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ellen, if you want to put some up, just you can post some photos at any time onto the Facebook page, even after the event.
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
I don't use Facebook, so that's a problem. But
yes, there's times when I think I shouldn't as well.
Yeah. No, that's very good. I liked yours a lot too, Marlene. Huh?
Mm.
Yeah, you're not. You're.
Marlene, you're muted.
Marlene, you're muted. Yeah.
No, I have my voice back.
Yes. Yeah, there's some great shots there, Marlene.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a tip from somebody. I had a tip from Frank.
Who was that?
Yeah. No, I think the level of all the photography was extremely high. Yeah, I'm really surprised and very gratified. Everybody interpreted the subject in their own way, in their own style, which was great. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. And the only disappointment was we didn't get a few more entries as we've had for one or two other themes. And
Yeah.
it might be the month we chose. Something just to think about.
Yeah. I mean, it's it doesn't start getting dark until about 6:37 here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's already. It's already. I'm already tired then.
Yeah. Yes, I've been going out doing light painting a few times, but only started doing it more in the last month. I was out last night with the torch.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
I completely got it wrong last night. There was a bonfire in a nearby village, so I'd set myself up well in advance with the church, which was floodlit, to try and capture the fireworks over the top, and I'd filled in some dark areas with the torch. And then when the fireworks started, they never cleared the roof of the church. So I had to do a runner to find another location and do a quick bit of light painting before the show finished.
Hey Trevor, then looking forward to see you here and going to the Sky Night photography and painting. You
Yes.
you can do a workshop here for some of
Yes, that would be great.
Yes.
That's nice.
Yes.
I'd be very interested in doing a workshop session. Yeah, organised group getting out. That'd be brilliant.
Mhm.
Well, as things stand, I'm coming out on the 19th of November. Need a little while just to get sorted. But I'm only staying for 4 weeks, coming back for Christmas, and then coming back out again in early January for a couple of months. And unfortunately, that is as long as Brexit will allow me to be there.
All right.
So,
Yeah.
well, we can organize it when you want.
Yes. Emilio, do you know any nice little ruins or anything for night photography?
Well, I think yes. I will look for them. Not looking for a place without lights, without lighting near them.
Yes.
But maybe yes, and also in Bedar, it's possible to look for something like that. It's a few not many pollution in the Sierra de Bedar, I think.
Yes. Heading over towards the Lubrin side, there might be something. And
Mhm.
Yeah, better is a little bit of noise there with the light of the
Mhm.
village, but
Yes.
just a little bit up to the Mount or Lubrin, it will be perfect. Yeah.
Mhm.
Trevor, I
Okay.
would like to know which torch you are using to